Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Caldera Intel series. I'm Grandmaster Gojj, and I'm back with another video. This time we are breaking down Subpin. It's not as exciting as maybe some of the other ones, but Subpin is a very interesting place. It took me one take. I only had to drop there one time to make this video because there weren't a lot of people dropping there. Now, based on the line circle, which you'll see in just a second as I walk through this gameplay, you can tell it was a little bit of a stretch to get to Subpin, so it isn't that surprising that it's not that hot of a drop. But at the same time, Subpin in general hasn't been that hot of a drop. I've had a number of in circles in there, which has made for a very interesting fight and makes this video very much so worth watching. But in terms of a drop spot, not the hottest. So let's jump straight into the video. All right, so again, I had to stretch a little bit for Subpin here, but obviously it was worth it because I wanted to make this video, and it also gave me free reign over the entirety of Subpin. I didn't even have teammates looting, so it'll show you exactly how much money can be found there based on the number of drops. I ended up dropping there more later to kind of double check some of my findings, and they all seem to be pretty accurate game to game. So, you know, this is based on more evidence than just this one game, but it only took one take, so we're going to walk through this video. Now, first and foremost, I gotta say, you're probably thinking about it if you watch all of my videos. Yes, I'm wearing the same clothes as last time. Everything's fine. All right, as you can see here, I'm flying into Subpin, and I don't know if it's like the lizard brain in me, but I always want to drop rooftops, and I gotta tell you, don't drop rooftop of Subpin. I'm gonna talk about my favorite drop spot in Subpin in a second, but just don't do it. There's so much open space, and there are very little chests or very little amount of guns on the ground. I mean, you can even see here, there's nothing in front of me. Like, nothing. There are certain places that you might see guns if you have, you know, a really good PC and your render distance is great. Like, you might see guns and you want to drop on those and then hop straight down. That's a pretty good strategy because, again, having high ground is always a good thing. We talk about this in our other videos. You want high ground. Everybody wants high ground. But in this specific instance, I can't imagine you're going to get outplayed by somebody that lands roof, especially if they have to loot for a good 60 seconds before they feel comfortable engaging in a full team fight. So I do loot the entirety of roof, and you'll see how much money I have by the end of it. Even if I don't bring it up, definitely pay attention to the amount of money I'm finding on top of roof. I end up finding quite a bit of money at Subpin, but again, that's what you got to remember. I'm looting this entire region by myself, so it's a little different when you're all by yourself here. Quick little aside, it helps the channel a ton if you like this video and also subscribe. I'm going to be putting out a video for every single POI in the game. You don't want to miss it. All right, let's jump right back into it. Now, on top of the roof, there is a number of entrances down to the main area of Subpin, which I'll show you in just a second. So again, here is our drop down spot. This is the major drop down spot on top of the roof. There are a few doors, which I'll show you guys in a little bit. Behind me there were big windows that enter into the normal part of Subpin, but first I'm going to show you there's a couple little like offices and like break rooms here in the Subpin that you can traverse through as well to find a decent bit of money. And this is where I start bringing up the amount of money that I'm picking up along the way, because I am finding fairly large stacks, and this won't happen every single time, but you can see even with the stacks of money I'm finding, all of the loot is pretty spread out in Subpin. And here's another entryway down into the normal building, right? There's a double doors there on the kind of left side of Subpin if you're facing the rest of the map. There's also a door to the outside from the ground floor that connects to that same whole passageway right off that main drop down, which is the main part of Subpin. Here's a small door to get into the main area. Now, when I say the main part of Subpin, what I mean is the sub-pin. I mean, this is the pin for submarines. Now, something worth noting, one of them, there's two large pins, one of them doesn't have water in it. It's dammed off, and that's what you're seeing right now, or one section of the pins are, right? And there is a decent amount of loot in here, but I call this the kill box of Subpin. If you are looting Subpin and you drop down here, you will find some loot, but if you have other teams nearby and they're all fighting inside of Subpin and you need guns, this is not the place you want to drop. You want to try to rotate around, use cover to your advantage, because when you're down here, there's no redemption. You got to come up these stairs twice. It's really easy to hold. There's basically one exit out of some of those pits. You're in a death trap. Here's the other Subpin. This will kill you. Do not jump into the water. You cannot swim. This is not Fortnite. There is a little bit of loot on the actual boat that's kind of hanging over it, but you don't want to go in the water, trust me. And this is where we drop down from. So you can see there's large windows. There's the top where we drop. There's large windows behind that you can shoot through. And when I was saying don't land roof, I still stand by that statement. But if you are going to land roof, land near the very front of subpen on the roof, find a gun, and then drop down, and you can shoot through these windows. I've actually caught a number of enemies unaware. They weren't really expecting me to shoot through the glass and take them out from above, as they decided to land maybe on the backside or on the side of subpen and swing into this kind of main body area. So here I am on top of one of the submarines, which is I was calling a boat earlier. There is water next to this, so there's really 3 pins technically. The one next to this is the one that had the open water in it. This is the one with the submarine in it, and there's one completely empty and dammed off. I did find a UAV here, which was super lucky. The gas started pushing me out pretty quickly, but I've essentially looted almost every single box inside the sub-pin building itself. Now, unlike maybe some of our other regions, there's actually quite a few buildings around the sub-pin area. It kind of reminds me of like Superstore and the neighboring buildings around Superstore, except even more condensed. Rather than having to cross the street to go to the gas station, etc., they're all on the kind of the same plot of land. It's like having a Walmart, and then you also have the restaurants out in the parking lot. Anyways, there's a lot of buildings around, and I was able to explore quite a bit of them in some other footage, and then also this footage is showing you kind of the right side of subpen and all the buildings over here. There is a decent amount of loot in these buildings. This hangar building's not a bad spot, and then one of my favorite buildings to actually fight through, because all of the windows are open, is this long what I call barracks building, because there are a lot of bunks in here. And again, this is basically a barracks because this is a submarine pen. This is war. You guys get the picture. So that's a fun building to fight through. There's actually a decent bit of loot in there usually, and you have all the windows. So you have so many outplay potentials with jumping through the windows, back through, especially if there's a lot of people dropping subpen, or if you're in the late game, utilize that building to your full advantage to win 1v multiple situations. There's a little bit of an office up here in one of the hangars, and etc. and etc. There's a lot of buildings to rotate through. Now, again, my least favorite spot to drop in subpen has got to be the roof, specifically like dead center of the roof. You have so much ground to cover. That building is massive. I would say square footage wise, you're looking at least twice the size of Superstore. It's like 2 Superstores lined up side by side, long ways kind of. Which actually it's really probably almost 3 Superstores. Boom, boom, boom. Make for an extremely large building, a ton of ground to cover, and probably not worth your time to loot up at the top. So I would say probably my favorite drop is either in some of the buildings outside and then rushing in and third partying from underneath, or you can land that rooftop, grab one gun, drop down the main hole, and like I said, shoot through those large glass windows down at the people that dropped at subpen. Again, not the hottest of drops. I wouldn't say this is the place you need to go for, something like a kill race, or if you're going for, a PR or something like that. We talked about how hot peaks can be in Airfield, but it's not a bad drop at all, especially if you're just looking for loot and trying to play a little bit of a slower and more strategic game. Depending on the circle, subpen could actually be a great boon to your game, because as you rotate out of subpen, there's this whole series of like network of houses in this like village area. It doesn't actually have a name, and I'm going to show you on the mini map now. There's a large kind of series of buildings and roadways that you can take and navigate through that have quite a bit of cover. Now, you are having to travel kind of uphill quite a bit, and that's kind of the story of this map. But along the way, I actually found quite a bit of loot in a lot of these buildings as well. So if you're trying to regain, you're flying back in, this is a bad place to kind of rotate out from subpen to, or fly back just onto this little village area outside of subpen and make your way through the buildings to make sure you can buy back your team, etc. So look, I enjoyed dropping subpen. I'm not going to drop there that much during Caldera unless something changes, but if you're trying to play a slower game, definitely go check it out.